A very good evening. The session is on the Israel-Hamas, Israel-Palestine conflict. There are two very important sessions. We begin with the Palestine session, that is Palestine stateless and in crisis. Israel-Palestine conflict has been a long-standing one which has led to many conflict and failed peace efforts. But October 7th changed a lot of that in terms of how the world is viewing Israel, how the world views Palestine, the question of the statehood for Palestine, but also leading to one of the biggest humanitarian crises that exists today. I'm being joined by Dr. Zeina Jallad, who is a professor at the American University in Beirut. She also happens to be born and brought up in Ramallah, and comes with a very personal story because her entire family continues to live in Palestine, whether it's the West Bank or Gaza. We don't have a lot of time, so Zeina, I'll begin with what you're wearing today, because when we were waiting for the session to begin, we were fascinated by what she was wearing, and there's a personal story there. So let's start with what you're wearing today, Zeina, and then we'll go to the crux of what this conflict is has been all about and how it has affected Palestinian lives.
Thank you, Gira, and thanks a lot for having me in India. It's a pleasure to be with all of you here today. To answer your question, what I'm wearing a Palestinian embroidered jacket, and this tells the story of the Gaza children. So it's in Palestinian embroidery. The side in blue is the sea of Gaza, the Mediterranean, and here is the mother accompanied by her kids with the hope for peace and the life. But the back of it is the destruction of the Adwan hospital and the destruction of life in Gaza. And this jacket was done as a part of support to rebuilding the hospitals in Gaza. So it was part of an initiative to support rebuilding hospitals in Gaza after the massive destruction. So this is what I'm wearing.
You also come with a personal story, Zeina. Your entire family is in Palestine. For people in India, people in many parts of the world, they understand the Israel-Palestine conflict as one that does not touch or affect them. But today, after the October 7th attack, many are interested in knowing how will there be peace when there has been such a massive humanitarian crisis that we're seeing and such a toll to the Palestinian life. In such a scenario, when you have family back home, what have you left behind? What does the day after look like to you?
Yeah. First, I'm really sad that we are here to talk about such a very, very dark reality and such a destructive moment. I was very happy this morning to be in a position where we're learning about medicine, AI, Ozempic, what does it do to people? And then realizing, like, I'm coming with a very, very heavy story to tell, right? So I was born in Ramallah. I am from Palestine. My dad is from Palestine. My grandfather is from Palestine. And we go to maybe the times of Jesus or even before that. So what I left in Palestine when I came here, I left my everything behind. I do not belong as much as I'd like to identify as a global citizen or the citizen that I connect with people like you and everyone in the room, but I just belong to that land. I was born there, my story is there, my family is there, my language, my education. I was there and I will always be there. I'm the salt of that land. And when I was born there, I was the generation of the first Intifada. People think of Palestine as a very complicated context. So growing up there, I grew up where we were not able even to go to school. I think I had 3 or 4 years of my childhood when I was unable to go to school. My dad had to wrap, and I have this fetish until today to have a school bag with a Mickey Mouse. And some of my friends in the room, they know this story because I've written about it in my PhD at Columbia University. So I grew up not going to a regular school. I was in the seminary, hiding, and my dad would need to wrap my textbooks in plastic garbage bags to show as if he was sending garbage to the bin instead of sending a child to a school without knowing this child would come back or not. So this is the kind of childhood that I had. Determination for education, at the same time, hope for life, hope for a better future, while growing up in a place that is so precarious, so unknown, filled with violence. I had checkpoints growing up to go from one place to another. My mother was tortured at a checkpoint for more than 12 hours, and she lost her life the day after. So that was like the kind of life. What is the day after for me? The day after for me is a life that I want a better future for me, for my children, for my Palestinian grandchildren, and the future to come. This is the kind of life that I want. I want life, I want peace, I want love, I want music, I want dance, I want much more joyful embroidery than a story of death and killing of Palestinian kids.
Zeina, a lot of people say, and there is a lot of blame that you attribute to politicians. There have been so many failed efforts of peace. But there still was conversation. Today, we have Donald Trump as the President of the United States of America, and a lot has changed. We were just showing visuals of Gaza before and after. And you know how this is how Gaza looks today. Certainly not a part of your memory, because never has Gaza looked like this, ever, through your childhood. And there's an entire generation in Gaza that does not understand what really happened to them, those kids. But I ask you this, there is a plan that Trump has put in place, a Riviera. What does it really mean? As somebody, as an expert who knows what Gaza means to the West, what does Gaza mean to the West? Is it just a beachfront?
I find this very troubling video behind. Like, this is like the very, very manifestation of a stereotyping, profiling. Let's paint Palestinians as people that are barbaric, people that are dehumanized in every sense, people who look different, who feel different, who speak different. And you have the Riviera, and then like this video where, you know, in 1917, people think of Palestine as a very complicated question. 1917, a British Balfour, James Balfour, gave a promise based on the view of the government of Britain at the time to establish a national home for the Jewish people, right? 1917. And they promised a national home for the Jewish people who were struggling in the world. They promised a home in Palestine. So they brought all the Jewish people to end their suffering to the home in Palestine. Today, what we're seeing, Trump is giving another promise in 2025, Balfour Declaration revisited by someone who has no word to say on a place that he has nothing to do with people that he shares nothing with, as if me saying, you know what, Gita, I don't like your house. I think if Alexandre lives in your house, it would be a much nicer place. So it's coming from a person who doesn't see Palestinians as even subjects that are allowed to exist. The level of denial of Palestinians' agency, right to life, right to decision, self-determination, all international and human, forget about international law. Like, I'm not here to talk in an international law language, but the language of utter denial of people to exist and commercializing everything, turning everything to a Riviera. What does a Riviera mean? Yes, Palestinians have the potential to build their own Riviera, and they are so capable and equipped to build whatever they think of and they desire, but how can we create the conducive conditions for a normal human being to be able to live? This is the question. If today in Gaza, kids are freezing to death, starvation is so real that kids have died out of starvation, not malnutrition, starvation. So if you have a human being, a child, who's being so tortured, so malnutrition, so starved to a point of death, and then I come and I say, You don't deserve to live. Let me do what? Let me create a Riviera for people who are more competent of deserving to live on the Mediterranean. This is what? This is at the heart of it, an inciting for a genocide, inciting for the forced expulsion of the Palestinian people. This is a crime of forced displacement of the Palestinian people. That comes from someone who has nothing to do with that place.
Okay, we will talk about being stateless. But before that, is there a realization that maybe what Hamas did really ensured, in many ways, the demand, not enabled, ensured that Palestine has no bargaining chip at the negotiating table, not with the US, not with the West, not with the world?
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. Hamas is a political party. Hamas in its charter recognized Israel, recognized the right of Israelis to live based on the partition plan and the international law language. The biggest image, let's create always a devil. Let's create the biggest elephant in the room. If we have someone that we create as the devil, then it's easy to blame. It's easy to, but they did this, but they did that. Hamas is a political party. They won the elections in 2007, right? So they were the elected government. What did the world do? The Americans decided to sanction the Palestinian government. Europeans decided to boycott Hamas. The entire world bashed Hamas. And then what happened? Israel imposed a blockade on Gaza. So before talking about October 7th, let's talk about October 6th and go back from 22 until 2007. So there was a full blockade on Gaza, sea, land, and air. And do you know what does it mean to live in a blockade? I'll give you an idea of what a blockade was in Gaza. So Israel, when it imposed its full siege on Gaza, it created what became known as the world's biggest open-air prison. Meaning what? No import, no export, no humanitarian aid, no access to the sea, no access via land, and no access via what? Sea, land, and air. And what did they do? They created a list for humanitarian aid. What is allowed to enter as a humanitarian aid and what is allowed to exit as a humanitarian aid. Can I give you examples of what was on the list? So the list classified items as essential, necessary, and luxury. Chocolate was on the list of banned items into Gaza because it was luxury. Wedding dresses was banned because they were luxury. IV syringes, MRI machines, chemo. What goes on the necessary also? Coriander, cloves, cardamom. And what was also on the list? Pasta and ketchup. It took from 2007 until 2010, when at the time it was Senator John Kerry, he came to Gaza and he was shocked to come to his hearing that pasta was banned for security reasons. He asked the Minister of Defense, where is the security threat in pasta? And then the Israeli Minister of Defense had to revisit that and allowed for pasta to come into Gaza. That was 2009. So you have a full population locked up by sea, by land, by air, no access to education, no access to health, no access to resources, no access to natural resources. They were not even allowed to fish in their own sea. Imagine, a woman cannot wear a wedding bridal gown, like the level of dehumanization. No one was allowed. Fertilizers were not allowed. So you have a full destruction of a system, turning people, reducing the level of humanity, crushing their dignity, and then, oh, they are revolting. Why we didn't hear about the Gazans all the past 12, 13, 15, 16, 19, 60, 70, 80 years ago? 70% of the people in Gaza are refugees. Where do they come from? They come from Haifa, they come from Jaffa, they come from Tel Aviv. They were all displaced internally displaced in their own lands, that they were pushed into Gaza. And yet again, now we're seeing it happening one more time.
But Zeina, look at the larger geopolitics of it, because we have very less time. I have to ask you this. Israel comes with a lot of support and backing. Israel has the United States of America. Israel has the backing of Europe. When they say that they are under threat, and they are, it is an existential threat for a very small country such as Israel as well. Where is the Arab world for Palestine? Where have they stood? What have they done? Apart from the words that we see post October 7th, what have they really done to resolve the Palestine question?
I'm not sure about the existential threat. Israel exists. Israel has free market economy deals with the EU. Israel is represented in Eurovision. The creation of Israel was the product of the wrongdoings of the West. Israel was never created on the shoulders of guilt and blood and wrongdoing of the Muslim world or the Arab world or the Palestinian nation. Israel is not faced with any existential threat. Look at its economy. What is the minimum wage in Israel? $1,500 something dollars? Which threat we're talking about? There is a strategy to bring the majoration of the Jewish people. Anyone, any Jew from Ethiopia, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Brooklyn is welcome to be a citizen without defining in the constitution who is a Jew. Until today, there's no constitution in Israel, there are no borders for Israel, and there is no definition for who qualifies as a Jew, because the strategy is the majoration of the Jewish population, so you have more people, one ethnic group in one land, while minorizing Arabs and denying their existence as Palestinians. So Israel is not at a threat. Existential threat, it's like the biggest fear. Again, we need to say, oh, Israel is that. No, Palestinians, they recognize Israel. They recognize its right to exist. It's a fact. The entire world is recognizing it's a fact. The recognition of Israel in the United Nations in 1949, it was a contingent recognition based on the implementation of the resolution 194, which is the right of return of the Palestinian people. If the membership, the creation of Israel was made by international law and the international community based on a contingent condition of the return of the Palestinian people, I do not see Israel is at a threat. There's no existential threat. The existential threat is the strangulation and the extermination of the Palestinian people. This is what we're seeing. Arabs, what did Arabs do? Arabs, unfortunately, they have a lot to offer. And instead, what we're seeing is today, Israel is controlling a lot, They're controlling the lots of resources, lots of natural resources. They are advancing in tech, they are advancing, and with all of their support universally, they are the ones who are being so blatant and so capable of launching so many wars, of killing thousands and thousands and thousands of children, and no one is saying no.
In all this, where do you see a future for Palestine? Because, again, I'm repeating it. Palestine and Gazans have no bargaining chip. Trump has put an ultimatum. He's already said that should you not release the hostages, that Gaza will be wiped off the planet, which means a large part of the Palestinians as well, not just the land. In such a scenario, where do you see the resolution for the Palestinian crisis head?
Yeah. And he said also, not only that, he continued it by saying, the ones who hold bodies, they are sick and twisted, right? And you know, Israel holds like more than thousands of Palestinian corpses, including 59 kids. Like they kill the kids and they continue to hold their bodies, right? So so the same language, why I'm saying this? Because the same logic that applies is always pick and choose. Pick and choose. International law works here, so let's apply international law here.
But Zeina, Trump has picked a side. Trump has picked a side.
It's not
you need to tell me,
yeah.
how will there be a solution to the Palestine crisis?
The solution for Palestine is simple. The question of Palestine has been An occupation is supposed to be a temporary situation. There is no occupation that lasts for more than 70 years, and then we say, oh, he picked a side, or they picked a side, or we're picking a side. We need to be today on the right side. We need to say no today for the mass killing and mass violation of human rights of the Palestinian people. What kind of side we are siding on if we're allowing for the death of kids? We run out of language even. Today, Palestinians, we see an emergence of language to articulate our pain and suffering, and no one is listening. We have new language, ecocide, scholasticide, to say the death of the students, the death of universities, urban side, sociocide. Like, we are even being creative in inventing language to tell the world, please say no to death. Please sanction Israel. Please freeze membership. We're seeing development on the international plane. This is not enough. What will happen to Palestine? Palestinians will always continue to exist. Palestinians, if we're saying you have no right to international law, you have no right to self-determination, what are we saying to this world? We're saying just the logic of brutality, the logic of death will prevail. And I think we need to be today more honest with ourselves, more ethical with ourselves. Why should we watch a genocide being live streamed and we're okay with that?
Say no to death. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Zeina Jallad.
Thank you, Gita.